The Giants falter in Game 2 in Chicago, and a lot is going to be determined by who wins Game 3 of the series. Are the Giants going to have a 3-3 road trip or a 2-4 road trip? We're not going to dwell too much on this game. We'll talk about it a little bit, but we'll get into some very juicy mailbag questions next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, please. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And where we get started, Giants lost 7-3. These day games, 9 consecutive day games to start the year for the Giants, are kind of throwing off the podcast schedule. So this one coming out in the evening, and the same is going to be true tomorrow, just because they normally come out around noon, but with the game starting at like 11, it doesn't really make sense to do it that way. So we're going to be waiting till after the games and then recording kind of post-game analysis. And so that's the case today. Giants lose 7-3. They fall to 2-3 on the season. Dylan Cease was good. Logan Webb was not at his best. He did allow 9 hits and 4 earned runs in this game. Made a little comment on Twitter that to some was a little bit not controversial, but they didn't like the way that I approached it with numbers. But for me, it was meant as kind of an encouraging way to look at it, which is basically that for Webb on the season now, we're looking at a really good strikeout rate of about 35%, a really good walk rate of only 4%, and a couple of huge unsustainable numbers. Like when we look at the batting average on balls in play, the BABIP, which is a funny word, I know. And if we look at the left on base percentage, those numbers are at levels that are not sustainable. And that's encouraging, is all I'm trying to say. He's allowed a hit basically when the opponents put it in play 42.3% of the time. And that's just unsustainably high. Moving forward, he's going to allow a hit about 30% of the time when they put it in play. So a lot less hits when the ball is put in play. And if you can keep striking people out, all the better. And then in terms of stranding runners, this is just not a number that gets sustained, 57%. When all is said and done, that number is going to be about 70%. And so he's going to allow fewer hits on balls in play. And when guys get on base, they're not going to score as often. And so I'm not worried about Webb is all I'm really trying to say. I actually like the quality of his pitches through 2 starts. Today, not as good in terms of the quality of the pitches, I thought, versus in New York. But still, I mean, I think the changeup was pretty good today. The slider maybe not quite where it needed to be. The velo on the fastball at times maybe sitting in the low 90s, whereas at his best it's kind of 93, 94. So anyway, it wasn't a great start for Webb, and the offense kind of scuffled again. They had some chances, and they had some quality at-bats and plate appearances against Dylan Cease. They just couldn't kind of break through, but they really made him work, and they had him on the ropes a couple times. Certain guys like Michael Conforto just continue to scuffle and not be able to come through with that big hit, and eventually it's going to happen. I mean, the dude's not going to hit, 143 on the season, and so just something to wait out. And the rubber match of this series is going to say a lot about kind of how you feel about the Giants going into the home opener. Are they going to be 3-3 coming off a win, or are they going to be 2-4 coming off 2 straight series losses to open the season? So that's kind of where things stand now. I wouldn't read too much into this particular game, but it was a loss. And so now let's get to some mailbag questions. We're just going to kind of go in a random order today. King of Norway, actually, these are in the order in which they were received, either the first or the last, or where we're going to start. King of Norway says, can you share your thoughts on the pitch clock's effect on the game? Will we see fast runners have a sharp increase in WAR and related stats? Will we see pitchers select simpler pitching approaches with less time to think about what to throw? Has catcher defense value increased? So I think, so far, the numbers show that stolen bases are not only way up, but the stolen base success rate is way up. And so that tells me that runners could be running even more because the success rate has been so high. They could afford to be stealing even more. So I think more and more, you're probably going to just see guys taking off left and right. And so, hitters who have the ability to steal bases, it increases their value from the steal, but it also increases the value of a single, because if a single can that easily turn into a double by way of a steal, then that increases the value of a single. And so it kind of changes what's valuable in the game. And then in terms of pitchers, being able to hold on runners, being quick to home plate, that's going to be vital, because being able to throw guys out will be a huge skill. Because right now, the success rate is like 88% or something crazy, 85, whereas recently it's been closer to low 70s, I think. And so anyway, being able to limit that would be a huge advantage. And then catcher defense value is definitely increased here. And so, Roberto Perez is a really good defensive catcher. Gary Sanchez has a really good arm. I think people sleep on that. He has the reputation of not being a good defensive catcher, but he's got a great arm. We did a whole episode just the other day. If you want to listen to it, it is all about Gary Sanchez, comparing him and his numbers to Joey Bart. Reputation for Sanchez is that he's not a good defensive catcher, but in Minnesota last year, he was pretty good and better than Bart in pretty much every category. Yes, it's a one-season sample. It would have taken too much time, frankly, to look at every year. It took the whole episode just looking at the 1 year. But I do believe Gary Sanchez is going to get a look on this team, and he's got one of the better arms in the game. You think Joey Bart has a good arm? Well, Gary Sanchez, on his top throws, averages about 4 miles an hour or 6 miles an hour faster than Joey Bart, and one of the fastest arm speeds, throw speeds in the league. So yeah. Next question comes from Darwin, who says, with the Orioles calling up top prospect Grayson Rodriguez, do you expect the Giants to call up Kyle Harrison and or Casey Schmitt by the end of the month? And I know Cobert, who's no longer going by Cobert, I think, answered this in the way that I would probably answer it as well, which is that they're not going to really do something just because the Orioles did it. Kyle Harrison, I believe, made the start last night in the AAA home opener for Sacramento, and he didn't pitch very deep into that game. Looked pretty impressive at times, touched 96, I think. Good slider as well. And so right now the Giants staff is so deep, they're having, guys who could be starters are pitching out of the bullpen like every day in Junis and Jelly and Sean Manaea. And so right now there's not a lot of room for Kyle Harrison, so I don't think they're going to rush him. But if he dominates and a need arises, they will not hesitate to call him up. And for Schmitt, I just think you need to kind of see more. And right now, David Villar, he had a couple home runs yesterday. He didn't have a great day today. But David Villar, I think, deserves an extended look here. And you look at Brandon Crawford, I think if there's an injury at shortstop, that could open the door for Casey Schmitt, who's basically splitting his time 50-50 at shortstop and at third base in AAA to begin the season. So coming up in just a minute, home runs. The Giants have kind of been feast or famine. What do I expect moving forward from a power perspective from this team? Is it going to be feast or famine, or is it going to be more spread out? We'll get into the home run ball, which is by many accounts the most exciting play in baseball. Well, maybe the triple, but the home run, chicks dig the long ball, am I right? So we'll get into it in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. How about this? You can also bet on championship odds, and those obviously becoming more and more relevant as the playoffs approach. And right now for the Warriors, their odds of winning the NBA Finals are at plus 950. I want to say when we were looking at this like a month ago, it was like plus 1500. And so those odds have crept up a little bit. And I don't know. It's just an interesting opportunity, and you can look at every game for the Warriors moving forward, and also baseball. You can finally check out baseball action at at FanDuel as well. So don't miss the chance for your no sweat first bet, up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, as promised, we are going to get to more mailbag questions. The next one coming from, who is it coming from? Ryano, who says, will homers make an appearance again this season? Or did we just use up our allowance for another 5 series? So I think this is kind of a rhetorical question. The Giants, they hit 7 home runs in their first game against the White Sox. They hit one today. J.D. Davis hit an opposite field homer. Jock Peterson hit the very top of the wall later in the game. And so, yeah, I think the home run ball is going to be a big part of the Giants season. You saw it in the win in New York, too. Jock Peterson hit a homer. Brandon Crawford hit a homer. And so up and down the lineup, all the way, to guys you might not even think of as a home run hitter like Thairo Estrada. We have not seen Michael Conforto break out yet. He might be the guy who leads the team in homers, and right now he looks like the guy who's kind of the most lost at the plate. And so it's early, 5 games into the season. You can't really judge these guys. By about a month and a half, 2 months into the season, you'll probably have seen the best and the worst of players. And so we're obviously not even close to there yet, and so we're going to kind of let that play out. But Farhan Zaidi made a prediction, and somebody asked about it in a mailbag question. He said we should be among the leaders in the league in homers. And some people said, that doesn't sound right to me. What do you think, Ben? And I said, I think I agree with him. And it's not because they've got an Aaron Judge in the middle of the lineup hitting 60. It's because they've got 1 through 9 and even the guys on the bench. Like, for example, today, Wilmer Flores pinch hit in the game, and I looked and noticed he hit, 19 home runs last year? It was either 18 or 19. And this guy's just coming off the bench for you. A lot of teams, their guys on the bench, think back to Giants of old. It's like, here's Kelby Tomlinson, who might have 0 or 1 or 2 major league home runs, let alone in the previous season hitting almost 20. And so it's a bunch of guys capable of hitting 20 and several guys capable of hitting 30. And I think it would add up to just, entering today, the Giants had averaged over 2 home runs a game. I know a lot of it came in one game, but they hit another one today. And so now I think they have 10 homers in 5 games. And so I get it. Small samples are going to skew things, and one game is going to throw things, quote unquote, off. But when all is said and done, when the season's over, that's how we'll look at it. We'll look at how many home runs did they hit, how many games did they play, obviously 162. But, in 2021, they hit, 241 home runs in 162 games, so well over 1 a game. And right now, it's early. A lot of it came at once. But they still count. They still hit those homers. They're averaging 2 home runs a game. And as a pitching staff, the last 2 years, they've led the league in preventing homers. And so if you can hit them and if you can prevent them, that's a recipe for success. And I see no reason why they can't do that. I'm not saying they're going to lead the league again and set a franchise record again, but they should be able to hit some home runs. Even last year, I hear people talking about how they completely fell off from a power perspective and it doomed them. They were 12th in the majors in homers, even in 2022. And so I think it's a little bit over dramatic to say that they were I've seen people really say they had no power last year and that was a major factor for their decline. They were 12th in the majors in homers, and going into, I think, yesterday, they're 5th in the major leagues in homers starting in 2020 when Kapler and the new coaching staff with the new hitting coaches who introduced some very new philosophies and mechanics, frankly, they're 5th in the league in home runs. And so people sleep on this team as an offense and as a power hitting team, but it's a big part of their identity. Next question from Scotty P, 33, who says, does Stripling have a history of starting slow, hoping maybe he's still working out the kinks? So I'm sorry, Scotty, I don't actually have this pulled up, even though I have your question queued up. I don't know if he has a history of starting slow, but what I can say is that, I think the spring training game against the A's when he got lit up and gave up a bunch of homers, combined with the fact that he gave up 3 homers to the Yankees, certainly doesn't leave kind of a good first impression of Ross Stripling. But what I will say is it's, really it's one start. I'm not really counting the game against the A's, although it does kind of stick in my memory a little bit. He does have a history at times in various seasons in his career of being prone to the home run ball. That was not the case in 2022. He was good at limiting homers, pitching in the AL East even. But as I've said before, home run rates aren't always quick to stabilize at all. And so you can have a season where you're good at preventing homers, and then you can have a season where you're not good at preventing homers. And so, pitching in Yankee Stadium, it's a great power hitting team, and it's a difficult ballpark to pitch in. Obviously, the home runs he gave up to the A's, that's a bad team in a pitcher-friendly park, but that game didn't count. He said he was working on some stuff. I just give him a little more time. I'm not going to read too much into this. Give him at least, 5-6 starts, and then we'll evaluate, is he kind of having a problem here with the home run ball? Next question coming from Callie, who says, barring any injuries or poor performance of our current roster, when do you think we'd see Casey Schmitt called up and at what position? So you're saying if nobody gets hurt or has poor performance, is that what this means? I'm kind of having trouble understanding, barring any injuries. I think that it's going to require injuries or poor performance. Like if David Villar is tearing it up, if Brandon Crawford is tearing it up, then you're going to have Casey Schmitt's going to have to wait, and it wouldn't be so much of a problem because you've got guys performing. The only other possible scenario is, I guess, if Thairo Estrada gets hurt, because David Villar, as we saw today, Thairo Estrada fouled a ball off his shin yesterday and is fine apparently, but didn't start today because of it. And David Villar moved over to second base, and JD Davis got the start at third. It's a nice kind of backup to have, and he hit a home run. He's a really potent bat. But, if Estrada goes down and Villar is doing well and you want to just move Villar to second base more permanently and Schmidt's tearing it up in the minors, then you could definitely see him. And so when do we see it? I think they want to see Schmitt kind of prove it in an ideal world. But if there's like an injury to Brandon Crawford and Schmidt's doing well, even if it's just like a week or 10 days into the minor league season, I would not be shocked if they just say, hey, Casey Schmitt, here you go. We're going to put you at shortstop. Don't worry so much about hitting. Just play good defense at short and hopefully hit a little bit. So these scenarios, they come up. Somebody's going to struggle. Somebody's going to get hurt. And it's going to give Schmitt his opportunity. And it could come early. If everything goes according to plan, which is that people stay healthy and people perform, then it could take a little while longer. But eventually there's going to be some kind of opportunity. It's hard to say when, but I think it could be soon if the need arises. So the next question comes from Yoki, who says, what is your way too early season review of the San Francisco Giants thus far? So we will get to that question, get to my premature take on the 2023 Giants, what we've seen after 5 games, in just a minute. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. Have you ever dreamed of becoming an MLB GM? Well, now is your chance to put those skills to the test. I know for me, I legitimately did dream of being an MLB GM not that long ago, frankly. Gave up on those dreams, enjoy doing what I'm doing now, but I still want to play out that fantasy. And with Ultimate Pro Baseball GM, it's the next best thing. I'm telling you, it is so much fun. You get to worry. I mean, I say worry, but you get to manage all the things a GM would have to manage: hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing difficult personalities and team chemistry, injuries, navigating your franchise through free agency, and all the ups and downs of a season, just like in real baseball. And it is not easy. You might get fired. Your friends might get fired, and then you can have bragging rights over them. So check it out for yourself. Tell your friends to check it out as well. Compete against each other. That's what the Locked On hosts have been doing. And Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. Just download the game by visiting probaseballgm.com, scan the code below, or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com, Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, here we go. More questions and answers. The next one, like I said, coming from Yoki, who says, what is your way too early season review of the Giants so far? They're striking out too much. They've struck out, but that's the thing. I can find encouragement in some of these numbers, actually, surprisingly. And that was kind of my point about Logan Webb, is that, okay, Logan Webb has a 6.55 ERA, but I'm encouraged by the numbers that are high are numbers that are unsustainably high. And so, that to me is encouraging. But one of the things about the offense is they're simply striking out too much. They had 13 more strikeouts today. They led the league in strikeout rate coming into today. I don't have the updated kind of rate of strikeouts, but they were at 31 point something percent. And when all is said and done, that number is going to be more in the 23% range versus 31%. It didn't happen today, but as I said, previewing this game, you're facing Dylan Cease, who's one of the best strikeout pitchers in the game. And Dylan Cease struck out 8 in 5 innings. So, but then each and every White Sox reliever who came in also picked up a strikeout. And the Giants, they did walk 9 times. So that is something that we've started to see lately. We certainly saw it in their big win against the White Sox. Was they've started to be more patient at the plate and kind of not chasing out of the zone. And it puts a lot of pressure on the pitcher. This is largely how we saw the offense thrive in 2021, was just grinding at bats. We've started to see some grinding at bats. Giants really made Dylan Cease work. And so to see the combination of power, yes, a lot of it came in one game, but still the Giants are towards the league lead in home runs. And they're also, I would imagine their walk rate, now that they drew 9 more walks today, is going to be, if not number 1, towards the top. And so right away after 5 games, being towards the top in walk percentage and also total home runs is an encouraging thing, and a way too early encouraging thing. But also, it's not necessarily something that takes that long to stabilize. Like walk rate and strikeout rate are kind of fast. Not yet. We're not there yet. We need several more games, a couple weeks probably worth of games to really get a feel for it. But just to see the quality of the at-bats improving over the last couple days is encouraging. The pitching has been a little bit disappointing. I mean, like Logan Webb with a 6.55 ERA through 2 starts. Obviously, that's not what you want to see. Some guys in the bullpen, like Taylor Rogers and Camilo Doval, each giving up 1 run in their 1 appearance. So it's too early. Sean Jelly hasn't been as sharp as we would have hoped. He pitched again today, gave up 4 hits and 3 runs in an inning and 2/3. The defense, this is way too early, because yesterday I said it was looking pretty crisp actually. But lately we've seen a little trend with Brandon Crawford kind of mishandling some ground balls, including today. Happened a couple times. One time it was ruled a hit. I thought it could have been an error. And then later it was just a pure error, and it led to some runs. Like for Jelly, 3 of those runs came in and 0 were earned. And I think that was Brandon Crawford's error. So I hope that the defense stays tight, but the guys who have made the mistakes are not the guys that you typically worry about, like Alex Cobb throwing a ball into center field, Mike Yastrzemski losing a ball in the sun, Brandon Crawford, although Crawford's had a weird last couple of years defensively where he's been he was elite down the stretch in 2022, but also in the first part of the year, he was doing this where he's kind of clanking some balls. It's not like we're talking about super difficult plays. We're just talking the ball takes a hop and it hits his glove and it just clanks off of it. And so he is 36 years old. It wouldn't be insane if he just suddenly declines defensively. At a certain age, you just get worse at everything, sadly, as human beings. But so for Crawford, I mean, him being good defensively is important. But if you have Casey Schmitt kind of waiting in the wings and perhaps getting an opportunity, let's say Crawford needs to go on the IL for 2 weeks and Schmitt comes up and proves he can play a good defensive shortstop, then that would make you feel a lot better about the future of the Giants at this position, because this is the last year that Crawford is under contract. So, yeah, my way too early take is just that they're inconsistent. They've been inconsistent offensively, and they've allowed too many runs. And so I expect those things to calm down, but you don't know what you're going to get. You might get the Giants dominated in a start, by the opponent, or you might have them kind of blowing up and hitting multiple home runs and drawing a ton of walks, or they might strike out 20 times. So let's let it stabilize. But all in all, it's kind of fine. I think this is about as expected, starting on the road against two good teams. But like I said, the final game of this series is a big swing game. Are you 3-3 heading home with a win, going home and playing a bad Royals team for the home opener? Or are you 2-4 and feeling a little bit like, okay, we just lost every series we played and we want to pick up some wins here so we can get back to 500 and above? So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Again, the episode's going to come out after the game. Hopefully we're talking 3-3 on the way home with a 500 road trip. Lots going to depend on that. The mood is going to depend on that. So I can't wait to be with you then. Whether it's a happy mood or a less happy mood, it'll be fun nonetheless. So thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.